Hi, thanks for tuning in today. Today we'll be talking about the Byzantine text type, why I'm interested in it. This is a subject that is important. We want to know whether the woman that was caught in the act of adultery, is that authentic or inauthentic? If the last several verses of the book of Mark, is that authentic or is that inauthentic? We want to know when Jesus meets a leper, is he angry at the leper, or is he or does he show compassion to the leper? Things of that sort of nature. If this is something you're interested in, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because I'm going to be doing a series of videos, Lord willing, and hopefully in the coming months, maybe one a month or something like that, in regards to this subject, the Byzantine text type. But in this video, I want to share with you why I'm still interested in it. I'm not 100% certain which camp I'm going to end up landing in, but I've done a lot of research, or at least I've had a lot of interest in the subject of the Byzantine text type for almost 20 years. And sometimes I see even sometimes New Testament scholars put out misinformation in regards to New Testament textual criticism. It's a specialty within a specialty. And I don't claim to be a specialist. I'm not a specialist, but I am I am a person who is interested in this subject. So if you'll stick with me, I'm going to share with you the 5 reasons why I'm still interested. So let me give you 3 disclaimers before we start getting too deep into this. Number 1, I am not here to defend King James onlyism. I have a high esteem for the King James Version. I love the King James Version. If you want to see my views on the King James Version, there's a link down in the description that will tell you why I still love the King James Version Bible. But that's not the purpose of this video. Number 2, as I said at the beginning of this video, I'm not claiming to be an expert on this subject. If you find anything that I misstate or incorrectly present, please let me know in the comment section below. And those who are watching this video, I'd encourage you, go down in the comment section below, see what sort of interactions there are. The third disclaimer I want to put out there is the intent of this is not to, how do I say this? The intention of this series of videos that I intend to put out is not to degrade or to come at this with anger or to attack people or anything like that. I want to just, here's the information. I want to give you the information. And if you're interested in this information, I hope it's just something that's helpful to you. I'm not here to start YouTube wars or attack people's character, and there's a lot of ugliness that's gone on in regards to this, and some of this I really get. I understand that we're dealing with the very words of Scripture, and I appreciate when people are passionate about it. I'm passionate about it, but I'm not interested in attacking people, starting wars, any of that. I want to give you information that I think will be helpful to you, even if at the end of the day you come away thinking that the Byzantine text is a secondary text that's inferior to maybe some of the earlier manuscripts. That might be ultimately where I end up landing. But I've sustained an interest in the Byzantine text type for almost 20 years. I read this book when I was a teenager. It's the King James Only Controversy by James White. Some of you are watching this are probably, some of you would probably want to burn this book. But I found it, when I read it, I found it to be fascinating. The one thing one of the goals I think of this book was to show kind of the superiority of some of the earlier manuscripts. But I never walked away completely convinced that the Byzantine text type was inferior. And so let's jump into the 5 reasons why I still find the interest in the Byzantine text type. So the first reason I would give you is, so let me, before I get into that first one, let me say this. The intention of this video is to give you honest reasons why I'm interested in the Byzantine text type. I'm not defending the Byzantine text type in a very rigorous way right now. I'm just giving you my honest reasons why I've sustained interest in this text. One of the future videos that I would like to do is one where I present the argument that's out there from the perspective of real scholars who have studied the subject in depth and who have come to something like a Byzantine priority perspective. So, that being said, the first reason I think is just this intuition. And the reason I put that disclaimer at the beginning is because I don't claim that this intuition is an ultimate trump card or even a great reason, but it is legitimately, I know it figures into my thinking on the subject. And that is, just intuitively, you would think that the majority of manuscripts, whatever their reading is, that would probably be the right reading. So obviously there's a lot of variables there. The majority of our manuscripts are much later, 9th century and later. So, they're copies of copies of copies of copies. How many generations, we really don't know. But you can imagine scenarios in which, a corrupt manuscript gets copied more than a non-corrupt manuscript. I mean, you could think of scenarios how the majority could become the majority and still not be the most accurate representation. You can run it through your own mind, but there's ways. But I think for me, there's this intuition. And it's the fact that these manuscripts that we're talking about, even though they're late, they're spread over a broad geographical region. So it's hard to think, how did, and the Byzantine text also enjoys this great, I don't want to say uniformity, because they're not, strictly speaking, just totally uniform. They're much more uniform than some of the earlier manuscripts. But it's hard to think how this consensus developed over such a wide geographical area as the Byzantine Empire, when it's hard to collaborate, right? I mean, there's no telephones, there's no faxes, there's nothing like that. So how do you get such a uniform text spread over such a large geographical region, and the majority be so far off? So I think the first reason I have is just an intuition about the majority text, right? Okay. So like I said, there's ways you can conceptually think of ways that the majority could become wrong. That's pretty easy to do. But I'm just telling you reasons why, my initial reasons of why I've sustained an interest in the Byzantine text. So the second reason I would say is there's this need to explain the majority text. The reason why the majority text and the Textus Receptus ended up being rejected was a lot. There was a lot of scholars that came before Westcott and Hort, but Westcott and Hort really did something different, I think, in a way than their predecessors did. They consolidated a lot of the data that was brought before them. They took a lot of the information from people like Griesbach and Tregelles and some of these others, and they presented a very cogent argument. But a centerpiece of their argument was the idea of a Lucian recension. That is, that there was a recension of the early manuscripts. And by that they meant they gathered up, they believed that at some point, maybe it was Lucian of Antioch, had gathered up this great massive of manuscripts, whatever they could find available, and then they took those manuscripts, tried to figure out what was the best one, and conflated a bunch of readings so that they would have one standardized text. And then by having that one standardized text somewhere around the 4th century or so, this standardized text began to kind of proliferate and go throughout, all corners of the Byzantine Empire. The problem with that is I don't know of any scholar who believes that anymore. But they continue to believe that the Byzantine text is inferior. There's a recent debate. By the time you're watching this video, it will be about a week old, between Bart Ehrman and Jonathan Sheffield. And I enjoyed the debate. It was very cordial between the two debaters. But one of the things that I didn't think Bart Ehrman was ever really able to do was to provide the theory that explains why you have the Byzantine text. Hort at least understood that you need to provide some sort of theory. Why is it all this uniformity? Why do you get all this uniformity between all these different manuscripts over this wide geographical area? How do you explain that? Hort realized that you needed to find some way to explain that. And what's happened is, for me, is that you take that major building block out of there, and then you still got this structure, but there's nothing to kind of support it. So there's sort of a parallel, and I'm not saying Hort's a bad person because I'm using this parallel, and most of my people who watch this video probably aren't big fans of Darwin, but there's sort of a parallel example in the case of Charles Darwin, right? So a lot of people, at least some people, had already proposed the theory of evolution before Charles Darwin came along. What Charles Darwin did is he gave a mechanism to it. That is, he realized that if you're going to have evolution take place and you're going to get amoebas to astronauts, he didn't believe in astronauts, but you get the point, this simplicity to this real great complexity, you needed some sort of mechanism to drive that. So he supposed, the theory of evolution through natural selection. Natural selection and random mutation was sort of the driver, the underlying, that was the major component. That was Charles Darwin's, contribution to the theory of evolution. Well, if you find that natural selection and random mutation is an inadequate driver of the theory of evolution, then it seems like you have to have something to plug that in. And back when the intelligent design community came out, they started to attack the mechanism, because if you don't have a mechanism, you really don't have a good theory. And so for a lot of us that have sustained an interest in the Byzantine text type, there's sort of a parallel there. This major component of Hort's theory, that point has been taken away, and then you have really no good explanation, or no real good consistent explanation. At least I'm not aware of it. So if you know about it, drop it down in the comments below. Like I said, I'm not claiming to be an absolute expert on this, but from what I've seen, we really want an explanation of how you have such a uniformity over such a broad geographical range. And if you take Hort's major foundation stone out of that, how do you explain it? So that would be my second reason. We need a theory to explain why the Byzantine text is what it is. So something happened as I was working on the editing process of this video. I realized that a part of the video somehow got lost. So if you believe that there is a lost ending of Mark, that's not necessarily my view, but if you believe that, maybe something analogous like that happened in this video. But we're going to break back into the video here, and what I'm discussing here is really my third reason, and that is that there are portions, and we're talking about sometimes individual words, sometimes pretty minor things, but using modern textual criticism like reasoned eclecticism, sometimes your manuscript support goes down to about like 1%. So like 99% of your manuscripts will read one way, and something like the UBS or Nestle Lawn text will go with all the way down to 1%. Now, this isn't always the case. Sometimes in Nestle Aland, there's pretty good support for it. A much higher percentage than 1%. But there are cases where you get down to like 1% support or 0.05% support, something like that. So that's what I'm about to discuss, and we'll break back in there. But while I've got you here, if you're enjoying this, if you're interested in stuff like this, don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and so thankful that you're watching this video with us. Now, let's jump back in. The Nestle Aland text and the UBS text, that the percentage of overall manuscript support drops to sometimes less than 1% of our evidence. So 99% of your manuscripts read one way, and the Nestle Aland has taken the reading, granted sometimes on early testimony and early witness, I get that, but it's taken, you pitted not just 80%, not like 70%, like literally there are times, and some of these readings are pretty important. In John 1:18, the only begotten Son versus the only begotten God. You're looking at somewhere around 99% of your manuscripts supporting only begotten Son. And that's a pretty big deal. So here's my issue. If you can reject readings and go against, basically what you're saying is that 99% of your manuscripts have become corrupted in this particular area. What I'm not saying is that they're totally worthless. Nobody's claiming that the Byzantine text type is totally worthless, I don't think. But they're saying in these particular variant units, the 99% of your manuscripts in some of these readings, they're saying is wrong. To me, that's pretty concerning. If 99% of our evidence, 99% of our manuscripts can become corrupted, or in some cases, 99.5%. Sometimes you only have like one manuscript supporting stuff that's in the Nestle Aland text. 99.5% of your manuscripts becoming corrupted. Who's then to say that 100% of your manuscripts don't become corrupted? It doesn't seem very far-fetched, and indeed, this has been what's kind of been the concern with the Nestle Aland. I think this is 28th edition passage in I think it's 2 Peter, where, or maybe 1 in Acts, I don't remember, but there have been conjectural emendations introduced into the Nestle Aland text. Now, they're relatively minor. I mean, I'm not saying they've corrupted the whole scripture or whatever, but to think, by conjectural emendation, they do have some versional evidence, but in those places they're saying that 100% of our manuscripts have become corrupted. Now, to me, that's disconcerting. And the Byzantine priority position, giving some weight to these to the Byzantine manuscripts, to me gives me some peace of mind. Like I said, if 99% of your manuscripts can become corrected, at least in a word or two or something like that, here or there, why not say 100%? How do we know that 100% of our manuscripts have not been corrupted? And that's I think it's a legitimate question. And if that were the case, we wouldn't even have any trace, if 100% of your manuscripts are corrupted, how would you even know? When I say manuscripts, I'm speaking about Greek manuscripts, obviously. So I would say that's the third reason why I'm definitely interested in the Byzantine text type. So the fourth reason I would say is that it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me that if the Byzantine text isn't the purest form of the text, why God allowed that text to dominate most of history. In fact, even today, when I did the video on the King James Version, at least in America, the dominant Bible that people are reading is the King James Version, which basically represents a Byzantine text type. So 55% of Americans who are actually reading their Bibles are still reading from the King James Version. That's significant. Now, the modern translations may overtake, and eventually people might be reading, from a translation that reflects more the Alexandrian line. But there's a huge swath of history that we're talking about here, where the Byzantine text really dominated from a minimum of the 4th century all the way into the 19th century, and on a popular level even unto this day. And tons of foreign Bible translations have been done based on the Textus Receptus or some form of the Byzantine text. So you have to believe, if you don't accept some sort of form of Byzantine priority, you have to accept the notion that for the vast majority of the church's history, most Christians have not had the purest form of the text. And this affects literally thousands of scriptures, mostly in small ways that for the most part won't change doctrine. But some of them are more significant, and you just have to ask the question, do you really think that that's how God did things? That might be. God didn't ask my permission. He didn't ask counsel of me when the scriptures were disseminated. But I don't know. For me, that's just one of the reasons why I've continued to be interested in the Byzantine text. The fifth reason is, if the Byzantine, some sort of form of Byzantine priority is correct, it does simplify the process of textual criticism. The Alexandrian text type, which has traditionally been called the Alexandrian text type, with CBGM and some of these other modern techniques that are out there, maybe that designation is going to disappear. But these early manuscripts tend to have a lot of disagreements among each other. And there's been some study that's been done. Pastor James Snap, he's got a website. I'll link to it in the description below. But you can see some of the work that he's done comparing early manuscripts. And I think he's really demonstrated that objectively, earlier is not always better. If you say, let's just say, for example, the Nestle-Aland text is the most accurate. The closest you can get to the original is the Nestle-Aland text. And sometimes you compare a later Byzantine manuscript versus an earlier papyri to that, for the sake of this argument, ideal standard. Sometimes the Byzantine manuscript comes out ahead of the early papyri. So earlier is not always better. And there are a number of, in my opinion, problems for reasoned eclecticism. So you can take particular scriptures. Maurice Robinson gives a few of them in an article that he did. Matthew chapter 20 and verse 23, the Nestle-Aland text, 27th edition, there's 7 variant units in Matthew 20, verse 23. Now, what the Nestle-Aland has done is it's taken, for these 7 units, it's taken one group of manuscripts here for this variant, another group of manuscripts here for this variant, and another group of manuscripts here for this manuscript. And by the time when you start at the beginning of verse 23, Matthew 20, verse 23, and by the time you get to the end of it, there is no one manuscript in existence that reads Matthew 23 like the Nestle-Aland text has. The same thing happens in Luke 6:26, where there's 6 variants. They picked one group of manuscripts for this variant, another group of manuscripts for this variant, another group of manuscripts for this manuscript, and by the time you get to the end of Luke, verse 26, and you compare your Nestle Aland, Luke 6:26, to any manuscript in existence, no manuscript in existence has Luke 6:26 like the Nestle Aland text is. And you ask yourself, what is the probability that if the Nestle Aland text in Luke 6:26 is like it is in its own text, that not one manuscript could preserve that one verse right? So to me, there's some great problems with reasoned eclecticism, and for those reasons, I sustain an interest in the Byzantine text. I think there's just this intuition about the majority of manuscripts. I think we need a good theory to explain the Byzantine text type. I'm concerned about the fact that if 99% of our manuscripts could read one way, and that way be the corrupt way, how do I know that not 100% of the manuscripts have somewhere been corrupt? Number four, it's sort of this idea of, do I really believe that the impure form of the text has dominated the church history, and the pure form of the text is something that we've just recently been able to rediscover? And I find that sort of a bitter pill to swallow. And fifth, I think there's this problem of modern textual criticism where it seems hard through modern methods to have a strong deal of confidence. You know, if in a number of verses you can have readings that are supported by no manuscript. I mean, each particular variant unit has manuscript support, but when you cobble that all together, that no manuscript supports it, I don't know, it gives me some pause. So I hope this video has been useful or valuable to you in some way. If it has, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We'll be doing some more videos along similar lines. So thanks for watching. So as I was recording this video, I just want to make clear that I don't think that the modern versions are horrible, evil things or anything like that. That is totally not my intention. I use modern Bible translations. I read sometimes from the eclectic text. I don't think they're horrible or awful, or they're going to lead you way astray from the truth or something like that. That's not the claim I'm making. I just want to make that.